I'm Johannes, and I think in these weird times we all have one question. And the question is what to do with that much time at home. I think there's one simple answer for that. It's to invent more board games and potentially use React. I'm a professional web developer at a weird tech startup in London at the moment, and I like to burn my tech money on publishing board games. And I'm going to give you all some advice or some tips if you also want to make some games in the current times. First thing, actually know a bit about the history of board games. I think there's one quote which you should know or be connected to. It's play is older than culture. For culture, however inadequately defined, always presuppose human society. Animals have not waited for men to teach them their playing. And why is it relevant for us? It's basically saying, okay, we need to look as a game or as a play from a much deeper perspective from just the silly thing we do. So read Homo Ludens if you want a bit more background there. And so let's say you never invented a game before. What can we do for you? First rule, know the market, but that's much too capitalistic. Let's say, hey, know the history of games and know what's going on at the moment. Know what people like to play. Let's look into very popular current games, which would be, for example, on the left, Gloomhaven, on the right, Spirit Island. You notice some things about them. It's a lot of complicated fiddly roots because there's a lot of different pieces. And people might feel dumb because they don't get the rules, which are both very bad things. You want to make a new game, especially the first game, as accessible as possible because it's easier to test for you. It's easier to test it with other people. And in the end, I would even say these games are not fun. They're much more mechanical stuff. So, and what does this remind of us? It reminds us of jQuery and Spaghetti Code. But we are a React conference, so we want to look at easy games. Every rule one can cut is a good rule, is the quote for this kind of thing. It's by Sid Saxon, one of the most popular, famous American board game authors. So let's invent a simple game. What's trick number one here? Trick number one is don't repeat yourself, which basically means don't do the same game again, but it actually is do repeat someone else. Because what is very easy and accessible for a new designer to do is copy a game you like, copy a game you think which is interesting, which has some potential for even more, and then modify it a bit, modify it into that direction. This gives you a good base to start on, and it still gives you some freedom to actually be this designer introducing first own rules. So I hope all of you know this game. It's Connect 4, and you basically win the game by having 4 pieces in a row. So what could we do about this game to get it to this next level, put it into modern times? I made the simple decision of just rotating it by 45 degrees. Now it's called diagonal 4, and the same rules still apply. On a player's turn, he's putting 1 piece into the board, but in this game, he actually has to put them from the left or from the right on top, and they fall down, and you still win by having 4 in a row. There's some extra rules we could go into some other time, but it's basically saying just flip 45 degrees, which introduces a lot more possibilities, and it's not as easily calculable by a computer. So we are also a tech conference. So how much effort would it be to turn this game into a playable version on a computer? Actually, not that much effort, because there's a great library called Boardgame Mayo. Boardgame Mayo is basically the Redux for board games. You just define your reducer. You have some initial state. In our case, it's just saying, okay, we have this grid of 8x8 pieces, and we fill up with specific stuff, and then you declare all possible actions. In this game, there's only one possible action because you can only put a piece on top in the row. So there's one action. There's some inserters you click them on. So there's some standard arguments to an action, which should all be very familiar to all of us. And there is some utility functions calculating valid moves, and some utility functions. Some actually wins because it's a game, some might win. It's relevant to check that. And then how do you make a visual? Because this is just a reducer. Boardgame.io is providing a pretty simple React interface for you. You just declare with some standard React code what your board looks like with any given state. And you can still use tables if you want to, because they're actually quite easy to put this game on the computer, and then use some CSS transform to rotate them 45 degrees. The question now is, why do you actually need Boardgame.io? What's cool about this? Pretty simple thing. let's estimate how much time would it take to add AI to this. And it's probably a big estimate, but with Boardgame Mayo, you can basically just say, hey, I need 5 lines of code, or 4, depending on how you count it, and I have my AI. How does it work? I'm just going to show you the video of the AI in action, and the AI is literally just this thing on my programming side. There's definitely some stuff going on in the library. Let's watch the video. So now the computer is playing against himself, and you see the pieces falling down. So what's happening? Every turn, the computer is randomly sampling one of the possible moves and then playing the game out depending on that move. So it's basically starting a tree for some of the possible moves and then checking who is more likely to win in the end. And for every of these trees, there's the probabilities of a win or loss is calculated. And there's some configuration. You can say how many iterations, how many player deaths you want to go. And now you see the computer playing here, and red is actually putting blue into its Zwickmühle, because blue is forced to play specific stones, but red has 4 pieces in a row now. So that is the full AI for this game. And you just get this out of the box with Boardgame Mayo by just providing a reducer and the actions. You get everything for free. Why is it important? If you make an abstract game, you always need to check that there is not one winner. There needs to be, in all situations, there needs to be some variability, even if the computer plays. So actually programming is a great thing to check. And what's even more interesting are games a computer can't simulate, because there's so much more happening with a board game on the table. All the social interaction, you can't model that, but we don't have time for that today, so that's left as an exercise for the reader. If you want to know more, check out Boardgame Mayo, and if you want to see some of my games, check out kronbergerspiele.de or hit me up at KS Yoga.